Inside the Gamecocks, the show, coming in now with Gamecocks Smorgasbord. None other than the pride of Hampton County, Alex Jones from thebigspur.com joins us. Alex, good to see you, man. How's your day going?
It's going good so far. How about you guys?
Oh, we're hanging in
It's
there.
been interesting.
It's been an
We've
adventure.
had power
this morning.
outages. We've had air conditioner repairmen. Where I'm at, it's actually about 78 degrees and sunny. So I'm going to go for a nice leisurely walk after we get off here. But I had to jump in. We had G.A. Mangus on. I had to turn on my computer and jump in for JB because his power went out. But and so we're doing well. Right off the bat, breaking news. I guess Dante Reno is in the transfer portal. I didn't necessarily, Alex, think this was a given at the beginning of spring, after spring, when it looked apparent that, Cutter Woods, Aaron Nolan, they're recruiting behind him. I just, I kind of felt like maybe this would happen unless he just want to kind of stick around and be a glue guy. Then you throw Luke Doty in the quarterback room as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't know kind of where he fit in. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's all too much of a surprise. And I think when you look at that quarterback room right now, obviously QB1, the North Stars, and then really that kind of QB2 battle, Dante Reno was in it, but you really saw Cutter Woods get a majority of the snaps in the spring game. You saw Aaron Nolan get a lot of snaps, and Dante Reno got some snaps in there late. And then you also, like as you mentioned, got Luke Doty in there as well. And so I think it was just, he was maybe going to see what else opportunities he can find from a playing time standpoint. Because I think, when you look at that quarterback two battle, I think it's those three are right there. Doty, Woods, and Nolan that are really battling for that.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. And that kind of happened as spring went along. Heading into spring, I tell you, I think he had a shot at it. I mean, but that's a core tenet of the program is, competition, and with any competition, you have winners and losers, and guys that are and there's a pecking order that emerges, and that's good there. I hope he can go play somewhere. I think he's got good arm talent. I think he's really got a shot. Good kid, like his dad, the head coach at Yale. Yeah. So they're good people, and he kind of committed. It seems like he's been a part of the program for a long time because he committed early. Just really wanted to go to South Carolina, and so you just got to wish him the best with that. And so there's another one out. The transfer portal is open for one more day. You feel like anybody else will get in? What are you kind of thinking?
I don't know. You never know. It seems like you're never going to know these days with it being just kind of wild, wild west. Like you never know who could jump in, but I haven't really heard of anybody else right now, but you still got a day. And so we'll see what the numbers are going to look like, but we'll see what else happens.
Yeah, there could be one or two more, but I can't guarantee that. And I think it would be a good day for Carolina with all the chaos going on everywhere else, man. If it just ended at Pringle, Reno, and Gregory, and then whoever they lost before, I'll take that. If you'd have told, you tell me before all this started happening, what was going on in college football and college sports in general. You tell me that, and then you tell me this is what they're going to lose. You could either take this, or you could see what's behind door number 2. I would not take door number 2. I wouldn't hedge my bets.
Yeah, the guys they've lost so far probably weren't going to make too much of an impact this season. But guys like a Wendell Gregory, I was really actually interested to see how he continued to progress at edge because I thought that was kind of his best spot coming out of high school with what he did at Walton County. So I was interested to see maybe next year down the road what he could be. And same for Cam Pringle. I thought, his potential was there, but I don't think those guys were going to make much of an impact to this season so far. But, I'm interested to see where they end up. And obviously those are all great guys right there, and good luck to them at their next stops.
Yeah. Well, Wendell landed at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Total bag. Total deal where his agent probably wasn't happy with the money he was making. Oklahoma State probably, looking at their outbound portal, they have a lot of Spike Gundy's got a lot of spots open.
Yeah.
And so they were probably willing to pay him significantly more. And in South Carolina, you just can't do that for a guy that is on the fringe of even being in the rotation. no matter how promising he is. That's the unfortunate part of like right now. I think when we get to, if they get the house settlement done and they get to rev share, most all of your inexperienced guys like Pringle and Gregory, they're not going to have the opportunity to go make that much more somewhere else unless the team's just desperate, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I completely agree with that.
Cool. Okay. So inbound portal, your thoughts about George Wilson. So you got two sort of familiar names.
Yeah.
I mean, Damon Clowney, when he was a recruit, of the guys that like never even really considered South Carolina, we are asked about him for obvious reasons a whole lot. I mean, it was like the end of why is Clowney's cousin going to LSU? And then he flipped to Ole Miss. And I'm like, because the staff doesn't think he's good enough, and he's probably not. I don't think he's torn it up, good enough for a depth piece now. And then George Wilson was one that was committed during Muschamp the last season. Big time recruit, 4-star guy. Got recruited over at Florida State. I guess South Carolina says he's 235 now. It says he's 230 at Campbell. Your thoughts on those two guys as depth pieces in the edge room? And look, if either one is a starter, then I don't know how much money you can pay Sterling Lucas, but it's not enough because if either one of these guys comes out there and balls, and then you have a 1-year development with Kyle Kennard last year where he went from spotty player to NFL draft pick and Nagurski Award winner in 1 year. I think it speaks volumes. But all that aside, Alex, your thoughts about those two pickups.
Yeah, obviously in that room you needed numbers with losing Wendell Gregory, and then with I'm not sure we know the extent of Jaylen Brown's injury right now, but obviously he didn't return for spring practice. So you needed numbers in that room, and you went out and got him. And I think with Wilson, he's kind of intriguing just because of he was a really as you mentioned, a highly ranked recruit coming out of high school. Then goes to Campbell after Florida State. He's been productive there, had 7 sacks in 2 years there, I think. And so there's some production there that I think Sterling Lucas and those guys can build on. And I'd be interested to see if he can if either of those guys can really give you really anything this year when they come in. Because I think right now, if you think about that edge room, you maybe would pencil in Brian Thomas Jr. as the starter opposite of Dylan Stewart. But, guys like Deju, I thought he had some moments in that spring game as well. And then you also got, JT Gear is in there right now. And I just think, you continue watching that room and you look at it, they just need the numbers. And I'm really intrigued with Wilson, especially because I think as I mentioned, there's some production there. And I think what we've seen with Sterling Lucas and how he can develop those guys, let's see what he can do with George Wilson and Clowney. I think, just anything with those guys, really both of those guys you can get from those guys you take.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Both these guys have played too. When they played college football, they're older 5th-year guys. Because what you don't want to do is, because if you have an injury, and you start at edge making freshmen go in and play significant minutes, other coaches will identify that on you, and then they'll check into an ISO run play on the outside, and they'll double team that guy and pancake him, and he'll lose confidence forever. I can't come back. You mentioned Desmond Umeozulu. Give me your take on him. I thought that. As someone that did not watch every play of the spring game, I watched enough of it. I had a spy sending me video. But the feedback, I thought that was one of the more encouraging things to hear, because Dez has played quite a bit. I mean, 112 snaps last year, and has played in 24 of 25 games since he's been here. Just hadn't heard much out of it. I mean, just kind of been out there. When he's played. Your thoughts on what was the difference in the Dez you saw in the spring game versus the Dez you've seen in the 25 previous games he's played in?
I think he just continues to get bigger and stronger. And that was the thing when he came in from high school. I think you thought maybe it was going to take him a year or two just because he was a little lean, but he's put on a lot of muscle. And that was something that you realized last year when you're watching him, you could see that he has. And now I think the next step was just that on-field production. And Sterling Lucas has done a pretty good job of continuing to develop him. And I think it's just continuing to develop pass rushing moves and then being better in the run game. And, I thought maybe he was a little bit quicker, I thought, coming off the ball. That's something I thought, just watching him, that was one of the first things that stand out. But, I think it's a big year for Deju just because I think it's now his time to put it all together. Like, as I mentioned, it was this first year, maybe two, were just him kind of continue to build and get bigger and stronger and faster. But now he's got an opportunity. He, I said to pencil in Brian Thomas Jr. as that started, but, don't count out Deju either. Like, and they rotate so much of those positions too, especially, having to give guys like Dylan Stewart and the starter, whoever the other starter is going to be, a break. So I'm really interested to see Deju and think he could be in for a step up season.
Yeah, that would be a good time. If you, Alex, obviously it's April, but who do you pencil in as the starter opposite Dylan Stewart coming out of spring?
I think I would go Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, I think because I think when you look at his performance last year, he really kind of had a sneaky good season. Like, I think it was somewhere around maybe like 4 tackles for loss or so. And every time he gets in the game, it seems like he's involved in the play in some way. And I think, the knock has always been that maybe he's a little bit short for that defensive end spot, but he always goes 110% when he's out there on the field. And, like I said, it seems like he's always in on making plays and makes big plays at that. So I think it's kind of his time now. He's learned from guys like Kyle Kennard. He's seen, learned from Dylan Stewart as well, even though he's a younger guy, learned from Dylan as well, and has some other older guys to learn from. So it kind of feels like Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of his time this year.
Yeah, I can think so. Maybe he's good. You could see he's got a high motor and actually did have some good production. I share some of the concerns JC does just from a size standpoint when you're going up against these linemen. But listen, you can overcome that with effort and technique.
And one thing I think he can be really good is obvious pass rush standpoints. Like when it's a 3rd and long, I think they can throw him in there, and that's where he can really thrive as well.
Desmond Umazula is 6'6", 255 pounds.
I mean, you draw him up like that, right?
Right. I mean, that's why he's a heavily. I mean, in high school he played mostly inside. Brian Doan saw him play several times. He said, "Well, this kid's got a long way to go, but he's capable." I guess anytime you beat Ohio State on an out-of-state player, everybody's like expecting this guy to come in and take over, like, Clowney style or Dylan Stewart style. But Desmond was never that type of recruit. He was a top 150 recruit because of his potential.
Yeah.
And if they can get that, I know Clint Morrison, our boy in the chat box, he's on the Big Spur as well. He says that's why I was so big on him. His frame is perfect for a DN. Yeah. They're really outside of like universal recruiting hype because Jaquavius Dodd was a 4-star by composite. They're really similar guys, like Desmond Umazulu and Jaquavius Dodd. Carolina obviously didn't beat Ohio State head-to-head on Dodd. He's an in-state guy. There's not as much foot traffic as maybe there is in the state of Maryland, but they're the same kind of guy. So there's that kind of upside. And I think that with Dodd in particular, although some people that have seen him, he's probably a little further along than maybe I think. But I think by year 3, if he's out there starting or whatever, that's fine. I also think there's some Devin Taylor syndrome going on where, Devin Taylor was a guy they signed. You didn't hear about him at all. And then he was starting the next year. And you kind of thought that year in 2009, it was maybe about, as a redshirt freshman, maybe it was about, depth or whatever. Cause I believe they moved Travian Robert. That's the year they moved Travian inside and he wasn't in because Travian had gotten hurt, something like that. I don't know. But, so, okay, well, it's Devin Taylor. First play of his career. He punches the ball out against like Russell Wilson and NC State, and Carolina won that game 7-3. So I always say Devin Taylor made quite an entrance, and so maybe people in their mind think if it's not by year 2, who knows? But I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I was surprised Desmond played 112 snaps with that group they had last year. I mean, that was crazy. So talking edge here, keeping it in that category. Here's what concerns me and see if you agree about edge. I think South Carolina, I think even with Clowney and Wilson, I think those guys can rush the passer. I think that's what they are, is pass rushers. I think Brian Thomas Jr. can rush the passer. I believe Desmond can rush the passer. JT, all that other, and we know Dylan Stewart can. What worries me is this: Kyle Kennard last year. It sounds weird because of 11 and a half sacks, but I thought he was elite against the run. I really did. I can't count how many times somebody tried to run wide. He'd bust their butt in the backfield. He set the edge. I thought he was very effective in the run game, Alex, as well. Do you share that opinion?
I think there is maybe a little bit concerned with that because a lot of it is a lot of teams are going to look at Dylan Stewart and be like, well, we're not running at that guy. So we're going to run the other way. And you've got to be good against the run. And I think if you're going to be just a straight pass rusher, a lot of those teams are going to feed off that. When you're running upfield, they're going to run right under you, let the tackle take you out and run right under you. Then it's going to come down to the linebackers being able to make a play. So that's something that, I think, they're going to continue to look at and see what they can do. But you're right. Kyle Kennard he was good all around, but good as a pass rusher, but he was also kind of sneaky good against the run. I think that's something that, whenever the NFL draft talk comes around, like that's something that's going to have him up on the board as well. And I'm interested to see where he goes here in the next day or two. Yeah. But I think that's something that I am interested to hear about. And I'm interested to see as preseason camp gets here and rolls along.
It's interesting. Some of the NFL evaluations I've read question Kyle against the run a little bit. And then look, I haven't gone and charted every single run play, I'll be honest, but he did make a lot of big plays against the run this past year. I thought that was critical. Kind of staying in this universe. Well, it's probably not a universe. It's probably more like a galaxy or a solar system. D tackle. There's a couple of different opinions out there about the D tackle position. I kind of like what I've heard and seen. I like Monkel Goodwin. I like Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. And then Hale is carrying the banner for Nick Barrett based on what he's heard. I think we all know what Hardy has to do. They're still going to look in the portal for a D tackle. Basically, Alex, TJ Sanders is a stud. That's a tough guy to replace no matter how many players you have back there, right?
Yeah.
You're even if you had a 5-star all-conference guy or something that came in, there's no guarantee he's going to be as good as TJ Sanders, right? And that's just life in football. But I don't really see where this position is hopeless. I actually think compared to some other interior D lines, including this past one before they became the players they were this year, I thought 2023, this is an inconsistent bunch. Keep in mind, they had many years where they collectively did not live up to the potential we thought they had. So your thoughts on D tackle? What's your opinion on all this?
Yeah, I do feel a little bit better about that room than what I felt before spring practice started, just because I think when you listen to the players talk, they talk about from a leadership standpoint, Nick Barrett's been one of the guys that stepped up there, and he's a guy who's an experienced player and could maybe be one of the starters. But with the way they rotate so much at defensive tackle, I'm not sure starting at that position really matters because they heavily rotate in. But Monkel Goodwin, I think it showed some flashes last year and took a step forward. Got Nick Barrett, mentioned him, and Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy, he was a guy who's a highly ranked guy coming out of Texas A&M. It was part of that, I think, that number one class where they brought pretty much every 5-star in, it felt like. But he was a guy who I think just got behind some guys, battled a little bit of injuries early in his career, but physically he looks like he could be ready to go and make an impact day one. And I still do think that they need to add one in the portal, just find an experienced guy, just because of the numbers standpoint. As I mentioned, they rotate so heavily in there, and you saw that last year. I still think they need to find one experienced defensive tackle just to go along with that room. But I do feel a little bit better about that room from where I was beginning of spring practice.
Yeah, I'm with you because you're thinking about this. Let's say Xavier Hardy, because his thing is physically he's got to get ready to go. But there's also let's say he doesn't get ready. It just doesn't happen. It didn't happen as fast as we thought. Because with Xavier, you're basically dealing with biology and God and nature. And some people can get in shape and reshape faster than others. Some people can't. It doesn't matter how much they work out. It has nothing to do with coaching or the player or anything. Some people take more time. It's football. It's everybody's on a different clock. But let's say he doesn't, and then let's say one of the three we just mentioned get hurt, and you're down to 2, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, except for you have Devontae Miles and Rondarius Porter, and nothing against those guys at all, or Christian Ingram. But Caleb Williams is already down, and a true freshman, so he's behind a lot. And you have to. I get it. I do think one, and Beamer keeps talking about numbers. I do think one, because keep in mind last year DeAndre Jules missed half the season, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, we talk about missing him, and I almost wish he would have played in 4 games and then shut it down.
Right.
It would have been great to have that dude back this year. Right. That would have nobody have been worried about anything. But and because he was awfully good when he played, especially early before he got hurt. But so you think so depth can be a concern with any injury at all there, right?
Yeah, that's why I was saying at least one to add to that room, just because that room is the line of scrimmage in the SEC is so physical that you're going to have guys banged up and injuries. I just feel like from a depth standpoint, they've got to find a way to get one guy in there. Yeah,
definitely. Let me ask you this: were you surprised that what Shed Surratt, the true freshman from Gaffney, did this spring? You won an award, I guess, newcomer of the offense. That says a lot considering you had a bunch of great receivers and a lot of good newcomers on offense. 6'4", 336. One of my buddies saw him at Gaffney High School, said he stood flat-footed and dunked the basketball. And my other buddy that lives in Gaffney has been singing his praises since the kid was a freshman. He started an offensive tackle at Gaffney as a freshman. Your thoughts there on that guy?
I wouldn't say I'm surprised just because he was – as a recruit, I was intrigued by him and thought he could come in and, maybe not make an impact right away just because of the numbers standpoint. But, I wasn't too surprised to see him continue to perform well in the spring game because in that second scrimmage, I heard he had another really good scrimmage and somebody that's been standing out to the coaching staff. But he's a guy that in the future, maybe he finds his way into the lineup this year. I don't know. We have to see. And then you hope that maybe he wouldn't just because you have so many older guys in that room that can take over those spots. But, for him in the future, I think they found really a gem just because he rose the rankings really late, but was a guy they identified really early on in the recruiting process. But he's really athletic and I think can play a few different spots on the offensive line. And I think he just one of these freshmen. They had a handful of freshmen who had really good spring practices. Throw Anthony Addison in there at the edge room. I've heard some good things about him as well. And I think Shane Beamer even mentioned him publicly too as somebody who stood out. But they had a lot of freshmen that really stood out, and Shed was just one of them.
Anthony Addison's another Hale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Hale's getting pretty good at this stuff. It's he's not surprise me. So and I'll ask you this about Nick Barrett, then we'll wrap up D-line. Phil, we're going to kind of hold it. Can we hold you over not hold you over during a break, but can we extend this for about 5 minutes?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. Because we're all off kilter. I literally came on in the middle of an interview did 50 minutes. We didn't have the clown song today. I'm all off.
It's all off. Everything is off.
And I'm enjoying this conversation. So let me ask you that. Nick Barrett. Okay. So Nick's always been a big boy. He's always been in that 325, 330 range. Last offseason, I saw him at the wing eating contest and I said, that's the skinniest 330-pound guy I've ever seen. Lo and behold, he had lost 28 pounds and was down to 302 whenever all the heights and weights came out. I see he's back to 322. Mm-hmm. I think I think that he's better. He's better when he's bigger. Your thoughts on bigger Nick Barrett?
Yeah, I think that's after last year. I remember seeing that when it first came out that he had dropped the weight, and you're kind of wondering, that's a little light just for that defensive tackle. I know TJ Sanders was a little bit lighter as well, but he's a guy who, he had 14 or those 2022 and 2023 season. I think he had 25 combined tackles, and last year just had those guys in front of him. And I think now getting that weight back on is something that's going to help him continue to compete and up front in the SEC, just because you have to have that weight, especially on the interior. But he's a guy who I think has kind of just taken over that room from a leadership standpoint. And, I think a lot of those guys kind of see that and respect that, and also seeing on the field what he's been able to do. But that's a key piece of the defensive tackle. And we talk about Monkel Goodwine also taking a step forward. But if Nick Barrett can take that big step forward in this year for 2025, that'd be huge for Travian Robinson. And, we've kind of seen guys who have worked under Travian Robinson, think about those 3 guys last year. After a few years working under him, they take a big step forward. And maybe that's Nick Barrett this year able to do that.
I'll say this. Byron Gerardo started all of 2012. I think Nick Barrett's better than Byron Gerardo as a player. I think all of them are. Nothing against Byron. I mean, he was an overachiever and played well. But the thing about those defenses during the Spurrier era, the little secret was they were pretty average overachiever guys in the middle. But like end and the perimeter and the spur or whatever, they were all elite players. So you can get by. But I agree with you. I like the bigger Nick Barrett a little better.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the Rasul Faison thing? I mean, you think that, number one, what'd you think about him in the spring game? And based on your feedback, it was an excellent scrimmage report you had. It saved me the hassle of having to put one together. That's why we love you, Alex. But and all that. But then good scrimmage report there, and also he's a guy you keep hearing about. A lot of the coaches are very high on him. Your thoughts on the spring he had at South Carolina? I know there's no update on his eligibility, but your thoughts about him?
Yeah, I thought he had just about the spring you expect him to have, being an experienced guy that's played a few years of college football. He's a guy that, I mean, obviously, as we know, all know 1,100 yards or so last year, Utah State. But, South Carolina, he just brings more experience to that room. And they had that with Oscar Attaway as well, a guy that's experienced. And could see Oscar continue to battle for that number 1 spot. But, I think he could be really good as that backup, kind of that same role he was in last year with Raheem Sanders. And, I mean, he showed some of that last year. But Faison's just a big physical back that, when he gets ahead of steam and he's rolling downhill, like you really don't want to have to tackle that guy. He's just a big physical guy. And I think he's got a little bit like maybe sneaky speed too. Like he can run away from you. And I think that's kind of why you saw him be ranked as highly as he was in the transfer portal and all the teams that are coming after him. Like just a big physical back that I think kind of complements the rest of that room. But continue with that room. Like I thought Matthew Fuller was a really bright spot in that scrimmage and somebody that they need with the, I guess maybe a little bit inexperienced in that room to step up, but he's a load and got another guy that you don't want to tackle. And he just continues turning his legs when he gets into contact. And now having that year under his belt, I think he now understands more what it takes to be an SEC back. And then also Jawarn Howe. I thought overall the running back room was a bright spot in that game. And I think that's something that they need to have happen because they can get those running backs going. You may not be able to replace Raheem Sanders, but if you can get those guys to all 4 kind of contribute, that's going to help Lenora Sellers in the passing game, but it'll also help Lenora Sellers in the run game as well.
I love Jordan Howe, and he's big too. People don't understand how large he is. I mean, he's
pretty fast.
6'1", 220 and fast. I still think he reminds me of Derek Watson, and he does wear number 22. But I'm high on all of them. And Fuller, I was told first scrimmage Fuller was 4th out of 4. Like he did not look good. The rest looked pretty good. And then second scrimmage and in the spring game, I thought he looked like the guy I thought he would be. Mm-hmm. Like you said, physical, falling forward. There's a picture in our photo gallery where he's stiff arming Fred Johnson. And I'm like, that's not easy to do, dude. Speaking of Fred Johnson, so I have this crazy theory. People don't agree with me, and I may be wrong, and I'll eat my words if I am. I think the linebackers are going to be better than they were last year. I think they got better players. And I think that, and I hate to say that because I say all the time, linebacker is not all necessarily about talent and athleticism. If you don't read your keys right, or if you're making false steps, you can look stupid in a hurry, and it makes it look like you suck. I mean, that's an embarrassing position to mess up mentally at. But I love this group. I think they're tall, long, athletic. I think they're just as fast collectively. I think there's a lot that Fred does that Debo couldn't. Your thoughts on that? Am I crazy? Am I a crazy glue sniffer? Or do you think I may be correct?
I don't think there's going to be as much as a drop off as people maybe thought there would have been with that room. And I think the one drop off there will be just an experience factor. I mean, you had those 3 linebackers who had played a ton of football and had played in Clayton White's system. But I mean, Fred Johnson that guy probably would have played a lot last year if the South Carolina didn't have a Demetrius Knight or Bam Martin Scott. Like he was ready to go last year, but he had a year to learn under those guys, and he's just fast. He's athletic. Like he can get east to west, and really all those guys can. Justin O, you saw that a little bit in the spring game. Sean Murphy, I think, continued to come on throughout spring practice, and I think the linebacker core overall is going to be pretty solid. And I think the defense overall, I thought that's one thing overall defensively is each unit that was out there, each unit was fast. Like they were running to the ball, like getting east to west. And another linebacker to really kind of keep an eye on too is Jerron Willis. Like he put on some weight in the offseason, but it was good weight. And there was one play, like I think he chased down somebody on the opposite sideline. And so he's one that can kind of get east to west as well. And I think that's, if Jerron Willis can really take his game to another level, that's going to make it to where it's a deep overall linebacker room, because those freshmen there, they're going to be maybe good players in the future, but those guys continue to come along. And Josh Smith, he's good. Tayshawn Austin, Donovan Darn's one that maybe he could play that Fred Johnson type of role as well. So it's overall a deep room, and you're just going to have to get over maybe not having the experience factor that you had last year, but I think they're maybe just as fast as what those guys were last year.
I don't remember who I heard it from. It was somebody credible. I mean, because I took note of it. It said AJ Holloway from Buford.
Yeah.
As a true freshman linebacker, looking awfully solid.
Yeah, he's a big dude. Like he and Tayshawn Austin kind of fit that maybe like Mike linebacker type of guy that's just big physical guy that can play on the interior and get to the run. But I thought Holloway also has decent speed as well to get east and west as well. So it's an intriguing room because you got some of the older guys like Justin. Justin is not an older guy, but guys who have a little bit of college experience. But then you got all those freshmen in there who it just seems like it's a bright future in that room.
I love Justin O. I may not be right about him starting because I think Sean Murphy's playing pretty well and he's older. And then you mentioned Willis, and you only have 2 spots, right? There's only 2 linebackers that play. Yeah. I think this at the very least, though, when they go to the 3-man front, which with this group, whether or not I think that's a good idea, honestly, depends on how they play Dylan Stewart. I don't think you slide him inside on it as a 3, unless it's maybe a obvious passing down or something. But Bam Martin Scott, when they went to that, was a 3rd linebacker basically, and came off the edge. He was a pass rusher basically, like Alabama calls it the jack linebacker in their 3-man front. Jerron Willis, I've said this before, if you remember the A&M game back in 23, where they decided to employ this defense. Willis was rotating with Bam Martin Scott and played well, I thought. And then in the spring game that you saw, I think he's got, just like BMS. BMS is not a good nickname for him. That sounds like some kind of bowel movement syndrome or something. Body mass superflex. I don't know. But Bam Martin Scott, he's got that same kind of skill set, in my opinion. And he showed that the other night. So I think at the very least, he plays that role in a 3-man front. This is kind of a crazy glue sniffer idea because I don't know that they'll do it. Because I thought maybe you could play George Wilson at linebacker, but it looks like he is an edge. 255 pounds, Jerron Willis. What's the difference between him and Brian Thomas Jr. at edge?
Yeah. Like maybe in some of those like obvious pass down situations, put him alongside Dylan Stewart where teams aren't going to be able to really fully get after or double team Dylan Stewart. That could be something they look at. That'd be pretty intriguing. I think he's at 255 right now is what he's. I can look that up, but I mean,
it is 255.
255, yeah. Like so that could be something they do. And I thought speed wise, I thought that was something that I saw from him the other night as well. That he hadn't lost too much of it, gaining that 255.
That's awesome. So he weighs as much as Dez. Dez is just 4 inches taller. Arms are probably a little longer too, I would think. I've always liked Jerron Willis. I think he came in as a redshirt freshman 2 years ago, and was really not a guy that I think they signed him because they liked him out of high school and we're going to develop him. So I would love to see him come on because that's kind of a forgotten man. Speaking of forgotten men, so Zabari Sandy, I think, is probably the one player on the roster like let's say you had to name the whole defensive back room, no walk-ons, but scholarship guys. I think Zabari Sandy would be the guy people always forgot, because number one, he committed super early. It's just like people forgot about Brian Rowe until they didn't. Mm-hmm. Early commits, they kind of go away. So Washington, D.C. Then he blew out his knee last year and couldn't play. Now he's back. Your thoughts on Sandy? I know he's working at the nickel position. Do you see anything out of him at all that you can discuss?
Yeah, he's one that's kind of what I was going to mention about, was maybe a little bit of forgotten man in that secondary, and had the injury last year, but a guy that I think can compete and be a solid, maybe a guy coming off the bench guy for them. And that nickel spot's interesting because there's, and obviously Joe Kilgore is going to get the start there, or at least that's where he was in spring practice. But I mean, Sandy could be a guy that I think come in, and I think it's just him taking that next step that he would have taken last year, but before the injury. And I think that's something that, that he can. Torian Gray has helped guys take that big year 1 to year 2 jump. But I thought he had his moments in that spring game, and we'll see kind of where he fits in there. But they got so many different options at each of those secondary spots that they can be so flexible with. It's pretty incredible what they built back there in the secondary.
I mean, when Vakari Swain comes back, I'm like, well, Cisse was really, really good. So what do you do? I mean, what would you do, Alex?
I mean, I guess I would move Cisse to nickel and Jalen Kilgore back to safety, but I don't think that's going to be what's happening, at least at the start. I think they're going to keep Kilgore at nickel, which I understand just because he was so good there last year and made so many plays there. And that nickel spot is so important in Clayton White's defense, and Kilgore can really kind of do it both. He can play the run and play the pass, and so I understand them keeping him there. But I think we've talked about it here before. Like, I think one thing they really could do is, like, in this obvious passing down situations, move Kilgore back to that safety spot, move Cisse into that nickel, or Vakari Swain into that nickel spot, and then you've got 5 true cover kind of guys out there for those true passing down situations, and let DQ Smith, who kind of showed that in that free roaming kind of free safety thing, can make some interceptions like he did in the spring game, and just let him kind of read the offense and then go where he needed to go.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Getting all 3 of those guys on the field, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. For sure. Jalen Kilgore played so many snaps last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have the luxury now of getting him some rest, so he's fresh. I mean, he played a ton of snaps. I mean, he's all over the place. Really, really good player. The queen of the Cox in the Nana Sports Chat Box. I don't care. Just put Swain on the field. Put him on the field. Hey, I don't think it's a given that he starts. Cisse could beat him out at corner. I don't. I think it'll be Swain, but I don't know.
Yeah, for Swain and Cisse, you can argue for both of those guys that are going to be too good to keep off the field, but they're both going to be in that same spot. So, I mean, there's going to be depth there, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of works out. But I think Cisse had a really good spring to kind of build on what he did at NC State.
Peyton Williams had a really good spring too.
Yeah, he makes plays.
Most improved guy back there. So, and Jamie Bradford says DQ Smith's his breakout player selection. Hey, I'm all for it. The more it's interesting when you get good feedback about each spot for people you trust, and you just kind of check it off. Eventually, you're going to check off 22, and you're going to be good to go. That's the games we play in the off season, my friend.
Right.
Alex, thanks for spending time with us today, buddy. Really appreciate it. Appreciate you and your work and you coming on with us. I thoroughly enjoy it when you come on the show with us and we can talk a little ball.
Yeah, man.
All kinds of ball.
Yep.
And certainly keep up the good work, and we'll holla at you soon, my friend.
Appreciate you having me on. Always enjoy it.
Thanks, Alex. Alex Jones at BigSpur.com.